Yeah, we're gonna talk about Outfit7. I'm gonna talk about a bit take part, and game designer will talk about game production at Outfit7. Now a bit about myself. I am Jon Primik or John Move. You know, we are an international company, so John Move is usually simpler to introduce. I'm director of engineering here at Outfit7. What this means depends day by day. I'm not sure currently. I overlook like 4 of our games at our company, and also they are done, the updates are done, how many resources, how many people we need, and so on. But I also have a question for you guys, so maybe you can help me with the raising of your hands. How many of you are actually in tech? So, you know, employed in tech departments? Okay. How many software engineers? A couple. So, everyone else just gamers? No? No one's a gamer. Ah, I see one guy there playing My Talking Tom, right? Yeah, of course. Cool. So, Outfit7, you know, in Slovenia we are quite known, so I don't think I need to introduce Outfit7 a lot. We are one of the top 10 mobile game publishers in the world, so we are not just famous in Slovenia, of course, we are also global. We have up to 470 million monthly active users, which is quite enormous. And we have more than 20 billion downloads currently of all our games. So, you know, each of you downloaded our game 3 times, if we simplify it a bit. Cool, so I will just give it to Rob then.
Thank you, Jon. So, usually when I get asked, like, what the hell does a game designer do? This is usually the thoughts people go through. Like, my friends think, you know, I play games all day, which is sort of true. My family, of course, thinks I, like, play with games and they don't really know what the hell that means. So, you know. Society mostly thinks I do programming. I know 0 programming. Like, I had 1 course in Python and I know that it does pretty colors, and that's about it. What my team thinks I do is actually true most of the time. I lie on the couch and I think about things or play games. What I think I do is a fancy thing, but usually what's the reality is I'm usually just covered in post-it notes and, well, trying to figure something out, but usually, you know, my team is the one that actually does most of the work. Right. So now that you know me a bit, I see that some of you were yesterday on the laptop. I think you were there. Yeah! Continuity, awesome. I'm actually gonna talk about how we make games in Outfit7. So essentially, what is the lifetime of an Outfit7 game? So the life cycle, really. It all usually starts with like an idea. And like you gotta figure out why the hell you're making a game, who you're making it for, and what it is. But the what it is at this stage is like, it's very ish. You know, you don't really know what the game is at this stage. You then go into pre-production, where you know, smart people have to figure out who's gonna make it, what they're going to make, and when they're going to make it, right? So you gotta sort of balance those things, plan it out, essentially. Then, we go into the meat and the bones of everything. You've gotta actually make the game. This is the fun part, where people want to tear out their limbs and eyes and ears and hair and everything as they're trying to reach certain deadlines, which are usually way too deep, so way too steep actually, for us to do. But this is the fun part, I promise. We then go into launches and fixes. This one is like the last moment before you press release, like that button, right? You're like looking at it and you press, close your eyes and you hope for the best. And then the game's out, it's got a life of its own, and you just hope it's gonna succeed, or not. And you update it so that you try to make it better. Hopefully you actually manage to do that. Right. Now we're gonna go through each of these steps a bit more in depth, so that most of you can get as clear of a picture as we can about how what it means to make games. Okay? Sound cool? Nice. Now, how many of you have actually made a game before? Like indie stuff? Okay, awesome. How many of you have done it in a big team? Like I'd say 30 people at least. Okay, cool. So yeah, the main point of this talk is actually to tell you how many people can be involved in making a game and why it takes so many people so that, you know, a lot of people download it and play it, hopefully. Okay, let's go through ideation first. So we gotta talk about like what the game is, like why we're making it. Are we trying to like make a new mechanic that's really cool? Like somebody had the idea on like the toilet seat, someone was like, oh my god, this is amazing, we should totally try this new mechanic. Or is it maybe strategic reasons? You know, Sometimes companies need games that we know are going to be fairly okay and fairly good, so we can make something that our users are going to really like, right? And we sometimes know what those are. So the question also is, are we doing this for people that already play our games, or are we doing this for a completely new audience? Let's say that Outfit7 wants to go out of kids games and we want to go into something that's strategic and like core gamers and stuff like this. And for us to do this, we gotta, of course, like do brainstorms. We gotta get ideas out from somewhere. We have a dedicated R&D team who, sit down and make new games every day and try to figure out what's fun, what's cool, what's not. And that's actually a pretty cool thing. It's a cool process, seeing like a team just step together and throw out stupid ideas. Usually they're stupid, obviously, but some of them are like little gems that you never thought are gonna be that cool. But once you see them, you're like, oh my god, that is amazing. And this is also where our core, I would say, production team comes in, which is called a pug. You know, like the quick, cute little doggies? Those guys, and product marketing. So, let's talk about the pug. The pug is a small dog that should probably never have existed because it barely breathes, and that's essentially how you could describe our team as well. It usually consists of a product manager, a user experience designer, and a game designer. So, the product manager makes sure that the game is successful. This means, yes, also monetization and other things. They also need to take care of the marketing, distribution, and everybody, make sure that the game is played out in the world. Then you've got the user experience designer for people need to know how to use it. It needs to be intuitive in some way. And then the game designer, which is my job, is to make it fun. So, that. Okay. The product marketing team makes sure that the game gets into the hands of the people we're making it for, which is why also while we're making the game, they constantly ask us, the pug team, are you sure that this is for the users that we've set out to make it? For example, if we're making a game for 6-year-olds, the game has to be made for 6-year-olds. Because we're not 6-year-olds, it sometimes happens that the game starts to be, and we can add 17 strategic choices and a talent tree and stuff like this, and they're like, you're making a game for a 6-year-old, don't do that. Don't do talent trees for 6-year-olds. And one of the coolest parts of this, I think, ideation phase is the art. This is usually where artists are just nearby in the meeting rooms as we're talking about shit, and they can sketch stuff out and make sure that the game starts to get a visual idea going. And it usually really helps. You've got a cool idea, a mechanic or something, and then you see some art piece for it, and you're like, oh my god, that's not what I imagined, but this is way cooler. Right? And hopefully, this gets us to an idea of what the game should be. So who it's for, and what it's gonna do. And eventually, we come up with something like this. Like the results of the ideation phase, where we say that we wanna have a Talking Tom running game, where the main idea is to keep our runner users happy. We wanted to act as a safety net for the company. Of course, we need to make money and pay a shitload of people to actually have jobs. And we needed to coexist alongside with our other games. Because if we make a game that's really good, but it eats up all of the users that are playing our other games, then we've done nothing essentially in terms of success for the company. And the one-liner is that one line that describes the whole game to you. So a runner where superhero Tom saves the world by kicking raccoons' asses. And hopefully that's the end of the ideation phase. We go into pre-production. Now, pre-production, there's a couple of things that we need to make sure that really happens in this phase. So the first thing is, game designers and pugs need to start thinking about, okay, what is the game actually going to be? So you're going to be doing this, and it's like a tiny little circle. It's like 30 seconds of gameplay. So this is what you're doing all the time. If you look at a game like, let's say, I don't know, League of Legends, you will go into the field and you will right-click on minions until they die, until you get strong enough to right-click on players so that they die. Until eventually, you get to the bigger loop, which is that you're doing this, so you continue down the path, you get to a tower, you start hitting the tower until it dies, and then you do that to a bigger building that's at the end of the road, right? And you've got 3 rows to go. So that's sort of like the overview of the game. And we have to define everything and put it out into a game design document. Now this is a giant document, and I'm talking, I don't know, 150 pages maybe, or something like this, probably more, where it's just everything is written out. And I do mean everything. Like the player comes into the game, this is what they see. Then they get the first tutorial step, which is like a little hand that goes up from the bottom of the screen, picks up Tom and flings him up into the air. Everything needs to be written down and defined so that later on the programmers and the artists and everyone else can take this document and start making the game. Now, because we are not actually making the game at this point yet, all of this stuff that's written in there, it's going to be like, it's more like theories and guidelines of what's going to be cool. So the job of the product team is really to make sure that this starts happening and that it doesn't go sideways, essentially. All right. So, the other thing that we're gotta think about in the pre-production phase is how many people we need and when we want it to release. Now these things kind of go together, right? If you want to release it in, let's say, 2 months, you're probably gonna need 200 people working on it for 2 months if you want to make a game from start to finish. You're probably not gonna do it in 2 months anyway. But the size of your team really depends on when you can release a game. Let's say, okay, we've got 2 years, we need 50 people, that's about it, right? 20 developers, 15 artists, a few pug people, and that's it. Okay, so we finished with the planning of it, but the artists can really start getting their fingers on the actual art. So they've done the concepts, and then they can start thinking about 3D, maybe a bit of animation and stuff like this to really make sure that the game starts looking like it's going to actually look when you're making the game. This is usually a really important step because people can get behind pictures. And people don't get behind large walls of text, right? Which is why for the game design document, you usually put these 3D pictures in there so that when people read it, they can be like, okay, I need to now read through 100 pages, but at least I'll look at pictures while I'm doing it. Okay, let's continue. The production part of it. So there's a lot that happens in production. One of the main things is, remember the dog, the pug, so the team that makes sure to know what the game is. A producer is added here. Why? Because he's the person that takes care of all the timelines and the people that we need and, essentially kicks us in the ass when things are going either too slowly or when things aren't going correctly. So it's somebody that makes sure that the game happens in time, essentially. Okay. 3D modeling and art starts happening here as well, so artists really get into it. They start making 3D models, they start making stuff like VFX and all those nice, shiny things. They even take the characters and put those into, they start making sound effects. This... So the sound effects actually start coming into the modeling, of course, and the animation starts happening. So we take the 3D models and we start moving them around. For kids, stuff like this is usually really effective. Kids generally like cartoons, and in games for kids, you have to make sure they get these funny moments. Moments where they can just sit down and relax and enjoy what Tom's doing. Alright, so during production, the artists are hard at work. The pug team, so the little dog people, they make sure that whatever is getting made based on the game design document, and that it's all getting made in time, is done by the producer. There's also a very, very large amount of programming being done at this stage, right? People need to actually code all of this. Jon is going to talk more about this in a moment, after I finish. But I'm not going to go into it right now. So, VFX is sort of the last step for artists, which is like making things shiny and pop and spells and stuff like this. This is all VFX, right? You need to make those things look really nice. Because if you take, let's say, a lightning bolt, it's usually just a very simple line, like a white line or something like this. But then VFX has the lightning going around it and moving things and flashy and splashes and all of those things. VFX makes the game sort of really come alive. Okay, now, we've made the game. Hopefully at this point, we have something that we're proud of, something that we know, okay, this is going to be pretty cool. If we release this, it's going to be awesome. And that's when QA comes in and they start testing it, whether it's going to break, how many phones it melts when you try to run the game, and things like these. And soon, very soon, we come to the moment that I explained earlier, like the moment where there is one person usually that they need to press the button to, release the game into the world. Now, we sometimes do this to relieve pressure. We do this during production already. Like you've got sort of an alpha and beta version of it, right? You release the game into a market where you're like, it's fine if they play the shit version of the game. We're just gonna see if it works. And you do that. You release the game, you make sure that, okay, it works. Like what we were thinking of, what the game design document has written in it makes sense, okay? And you release it the first time and it's like, yay, it's good, continue making the game. We continue making the game. We improve things, we add new things, we release it again in maybe a bit of a bigger market, like Malaysia or something like this. And again, you see like, oh my god, yes, okay, it's working, okay, our hypotheses are right. What often, of course, happens is that you release the game and at this point you say, oh fuck, we fucked everything up, this is horrible, oh my god, no, please, no, please don't. And then it's like 2 months of just fixing the game and trying to do whatever you can to make it follow along with the vision of what you have for the game. And sometimes this happens and sometimes it doesn't. If it happens that you are able to fix it, the game of course goes into global launch. People get the game, people can play it, everyone is happy, the game gets released and lives a life of its own, sort of. Or sometimes, well, a game doesn't perform that well, you need to take a pillow, you need to go to the game and just like, and put the pillow over the game's head and just wait for a while. You guys. Which also happens, unfortunately, very often, and you'd be surprised how many games get killed before anybody even knows about it. Okay, now let's say the game did survive and we released it and it's like, oh my god, it's living a life of its own, but like you release it and you're like, good job, you're doing a great job, oh my god, you're gonna kill yourself, and you see that there should be improvements to the game, and that's when updates come in. There is a whole product marketing part of it that I wanted to explain but forgot about completely. And I'm going to tell you about it really quickly, which is somebody needs to make sure the game gets to the people that you want to play it, right? And the product and marketing team does this. So like they make campaigns like, okay, social media, we can make leaflets and like fly planes over cities and release those leaflets into the cities so that people will know that this game is being released. And they try to make sure that the game gets into the right hands and as many hands as possible. The other thing is, we at Outfit actually translate our games. There's a lot of languages. There's like 14 written right here, which is actually 13 because there's 2 Chinese ones. But I don't want to get into this too much, but there's a really interesting fact about it. So, imagine the word views in English. I think it has 5 letters. Now try translating that into Italian. Does anyone know the Italian word for views? No? Okay. So the Italian word for views is visualizzazione, which means if you put views on a button, it sort of looks like this. So when you're translating the game, you need to make sure that like when you look at buttons and little squares or anything that gets translated can actually be translated, unless you just have like this in like dot 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 and across the entire game, right? Okay, so the game has been released. The game has a life of its own. It's waddling down the street and it's having a happy life, and that's where updates come in. You try to improve the game. You try to make it better. You listen to your players. You try to make sure that what they want is actually what they're getting, and you do this over and over and over and over and over again, until eventually you're happy enough with the game that it has a life of its own. You let it do Christmas events and you let it do similar things, and hopefully at that point the game is released and you can be proud of it. I think that's going to be all from my side. I hope you had a bit of an insight into how much time, how much people, how much effort it takes to make a game. For this, for example, for the Hero Dash 1, it took about what? At least 100 people put all together to make the game successful in the world. Now, Jon, I would ask you to come up and say a few things about Ticket out there.
Let's do it. You know what I hate? I hear my own voice. No one should ever hear his own voice. Like, I will try to ignore it, but it's gonna be hard. So, I'm gonna talk about our tech at Outfit7, what teams we have and so on. So, like, in the whole company there's around 400 plus people, And in the tech department, there's around 150 people, give or take. And we have it split in multiple teams. The first one and the biggest one is, of course, game development, right? We have here, I'd say around 40, 50 game developers that are working on 20 plus games at the moment, and also prototypes, right? We do that all the time. As Rob said, many times you have to put the pillow, on the app and let it go to sleep. Then we also have a native department because, Android and iOS, in the end, they are quite different. So you still have to do some stuff differently. And the third one is backend and frontend. We don't actually have servers. We have everything in the cloud. We use GCP, so Google Cloud Platform. But still, a lot of stuff going on, and I will speak about these things a bit later. The next one also, as Rob mentioned, we have this quality assurance, so QA. These things are spread out across all the technical departments. We of course have analytics. I think there's like 15 plus of them currently. And of course ads. Someone has to pay for my car, someone has to pay for our salaries, and it is what it is. So let's first check the game development. So as I mentioned, we have multiple games. We have around 10 developers per game, but it depends on the game, right? So if it's in update phase, it has less people on it. And if it's a new game, of course, there's more developers on it. We also have these game engines. Some of you are developers, so you probably know. Most of our games are done with Unity engine, but we also have our own custom in-house game engine. We made it because Unity was too slow for us. So we also have our own game engine, which is around 20% faster, more optimized, takes less space on your device, and so on. Cool. So main part of game development is done in C# because we use Unity. As also Rob mentioned, we have millions and millions and millions of users, which of course brings different challenges, right? And we have experts on all of these departments. We have people, that go around conferences in the world and, they talk about our experiences, their knowledge, and so on multiple conferences. So if you go to San Francisco, if you go to London, if you go to Beijing, usually there's at least one expert from us there, also, sharing how we do stuff like that. So me and Rob are sharing a bit now, but much more in depth. We also develop a lot of custom developer tools. Once the thing is big, like 400 people, you do a lot of custom stuff. So that's also quite interesting. And once you get this big, you have contracts with Google, you have contracts with Unity, you actually give them feedback, and they actually implement a lot of stuff, not just for Outfit7, but like for the whole world, which is quite amazing to, talk with these guys and give them feedback. Everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about a bit of our interesting challenges that we have. I remember doing this, this is my talking Angela too, and I remember there was a developer that came to Outfit7 and he was still in faculty, so free, and he said, fuck, why are they teaching linear algebra? Why? When am I ever going to use this? And then the first game he was on, he used linear algebra to make this makeup. So if you would know linear algebra, it would look something like in the middle, right? You don't want that. Yeah, that was pretty interesting. The next one, also I think pretty much had it on the slides, that I'm just going to talk about this. No, I'm not. Is also this my talking its own friends avoidance, right? You might think, yeah, there's like hundreds of algorithms that do this. You don't have to work on this. But if you have like 400 million monthly active users, you want an algorithm, that doesn't drain the battery. You don't want just the first solution that comes to mind, right? So if you're doing mobile development, and if you are in all of the countries, then you have to do a lot of optimizations. You have to, conserve battery. You have to conserve memory. You have to conserve processing power, anything really. So in the end, we tried like 10 algorithms, but of course, we did a custom solution, so something in between. If someone has more answers, we can talk about a bit this later. That's why I asked in the beginning, how many of you are developers and how many are not. So I'm not going to go into this because it's a mixed crowd, but it was quite interesting. So one of the things I also mentioned is prototypes. We do like one every 2 weeks or even more. And then we go into these phases that Rob mentioned, right? Not many of the games come to the release actually. Like we use Malaysia, so Malaysian users are happy, they have much more games than you do. In the past this was Canada, but all of the companies in the world knew that Canada is good for testing, and Canada had like, 50% more ads than the rest of the world, and it was kind of overflown. So now we are like splitting between countries, depends on the ad. So yeah, prototypes are done a bit differently because speed is of the essence. You don't have to do quality games, you just have to do it quickly, test it, and then throw it away, or put it in production in the end. As I said, we have millions and millions of users, we have multiple different gameplays, we also have multiplayer games. I don't know if you know Mythic Legends. Anyone tried it yet? And? Aha, okay, we'll talk about it later. Cool. So yeah, we try multiplayer games every now and then, but with multiplayer games, the challenges are like times 10 compared to normal multiplayer games, right? You can imagine the take behind multiplayer games is crazy, and it costs a lot. If you have a single player, you just release the game and the costs are practically zero, right? But if you have multiplayer, you constantly have users connecting to your servers and so on. Cool. So the next one, as I mentioned, is native and ads development. This one is quite big because even though Unity Engine says, yeah, you just make a game in Unity Engine and then you can release it to Xbox, PlayStation, Android, iOS, not really, right? In the end, Apple and Google treat a lot of stuff much differently, like from ears to ads. Also, this amazing stupid thing that someone came up with, these notches, this stuff, where your camera is at the top of your phone. You must know where this notch is, otherwise you could display like a button or something, that actually makes the app function behind it. So we also have to treat this. And just like for comparison, iOS has 15 different devices, give or take. Android has 15,000. So yeah, I'm not saying we support all of them, but we try, right? Anything else to mention? Not really. We can go on. Cool. So native development. Also, one of the things probably most of you know is there is no Google in China, right? But it doesn't mean there are no Android phones. No, Android is still the biggest in China, but they don't have Google Play Store. But they have 50 plus Chinese app stores. And since a small Chinese app store could have 50 million users because China is that big, it kind of makes sense to be on all of them, right? So we actually release, besides Google Play and iOS, we also release on 50 plus Android app stores in China, which is, I could talk about working with the Chinese people for hours, but let's go to something more interesting. Also hackers. Once you get this big, we have like 100,000 hackers every day. Hack APKs, hack builds, and so on. So we also have to tackle those. But as long as they watch our ads, we don't care, but usually they hack it in a way they show their own ads in our games, so it's, we're losing revenue, we kind of have to do something about it. We have 70 plus ad providers, and also we actually have one of the best mediation tools in the world. This is what makes Outfit7 successful in the end. What is it in mediation? Mediation is, choosing which ad to show to who in which country. And we actually compared it to Google's ad mediation, and ours was better. So I'm not, over-exaggerating. This is what makes Outfit7 Outfit7. Besides awesome people like Rob, right? Yes. And cross-promotion, of course, if we have 5 successful games, we want to make the 6th one also successful, we can just display, in our current games, install our 6th game. So this is also quite useful in the beginning because you get a lot of installs. Backend and frontend. Why do you think I love backend the most? I was a backend developer in the beginning. So yeah, we have 2 billion requests per day to our servers. We have around more than 5 terabytes of data each day of different events and stuff. We use 1500 CPU cores and about 2 terabytes of RAM. This is every day, right? And that gets around 25k to 30k requests per second. So you can imagine. And since we're all over the world, at some time the US are awake, and at the other time the Chinese are awake. So you have to have this balancing quite optimized, so you don't have too much cost. Servers must not sleep. You must just need them when you need them. This is just quickly, maybe for more tech guys, how our infrastructure on Google Cloud looks like. We use a Kubernetes, we use App Engine, we use Cloud Run. We are also on AWS, and of course in China we are on AliCloud. So a lot of stuff everywhere. Backend. Yes. So the difference between game development and backend development is that backend is up 24/7. So it's quite important that you have a lot of these fallbacks, that the app is never crashing, even if the servers are crashing. So a lot of these safety checks need to be implemented. Okay, I'm good. So it has to be scalable, and as I mentioned, multiplayer, connecting a European user with US user and doing it in under 100 milliseconds, yeah, good luck with that. But you have to do it. If you want a successful multiplayer, you have to do it. We have 30 plus apps, hundreds of millions of users. I think I said that like a couple of times, I'm sorry about that. Cost efficiency, as I said, also caching, we have 5 different levels of cache, so you don't have too much cost. And under backend, we also have this front-end team, and they are doing, internal dashboards. So the analytics and marketing and product guys and game designers can do a lot of stuff without triggering game developers to do something. Analytics. Cool. So yeah, that's actually how they look like. Every day they just come, where is my data? And hopefully it is stored somewhere, but if servers were crashing for the weekend, someone's gonna be very happy. But it happens. We have 600 plus A/B tests. Do you know what an A/B test is? Everyone knows what an A/B test is. Who doesn't know what A/B test is? Thank you for raising your hand. I will just skip otherwise. What is an A/B test? This is like crucial to making a game also successful. So once we make a feature, or let's say we add a red chair, right? We want to know if we added this red chair, would the users love it more, or would it actually damage our game? So we display this red chair, this feature, to 50% of the users, and to other 50% we don't. And then we compare this data like for 2 weeks, and then we see, it makes sense, the users love it. Of course, it gets much more complicated. You just don't have 2 groups, you have like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, G, blah, blah, blah. And we constantly run this. Every single button in our game, it was A/B tested. Nothing is random. So this is also the data I was talking about, like 5 terabytes of data. These are the events from these A/B tests, mostly, right? So we know if certain feature really improved our game, or was it just like, yeah, 5 terabytes of data. We have more than 2 petabytes of data currently stored. We of course have to remove it also because of GDPR. And they did 1.4 million queries in 2021. I think there's now 15 of these analytics guys currently at Outfit7. Cool. Maybe I was going quite fast. Oh, did I go very fast? You also did? Okay, you also went a bit.
They're both quick, which is quite rare, but it's fine. Okay, so this is the Q&A part of the whole thing. I think we've got pretty much how much time we have.
We got time.
We got 1 minute. Okay, no, I'm kidding. So we have some time for some questions. Now this is ask us anything. Please, nothing too personal. We're both a bit shy. So if you have any questions about game development, Outfit7, or anything else that you're interested in, please let us know. Raise up your hand. We'll get a microphone to you, and that's it. Questions? Woo! Oh my God, 2 hands.
Just a second. I also forgot to mention we have this Outfit7 tech blog. So there's a lot of information more technical on it for those that might be interested. It's on medium.com/Outfit7. Go.
Hello. Thanks for the talk. I also don't like hearing myself speak.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I have a question about how you're promoting your games. So do you do it like with the new games? You release a game, you launch it. Do you promote it through mostly your other games, or do you do like Facebook ads, stuff like that, or bit by bit?
That's a complicated question. Like a lot of stuff is going on. So at the beginning, do you want to take this? So at the beginning, you know, this cross promotion that I mentioned, where we advertise our games in our games, at the beginning this is very important. Because if you get a lot of installs, you also raise on the leaderboard in Google Play and iOS. And if you get higher on the board, you get more direct downloads also. So this is kind of, you know, snowball effect, and then you get a lot of installs. So this cross promotion is important at the early stages of the game. But you also use different marketing stuff, you know, from publishing websites before having these subscriptions or what they call pre-registrations. Also some ads, of course, on other games also. So yeah, a lot of stuff is going on, not just cross promotion or. Did I answer your question?
There's also the PUA part of it, which is paid user acquisition. That is actually a huge part of like where even our money goes, because you have to invest a lot of money into advertising and stuff like this so that you get enough users to come into the game. So like you said, first you get a lot of people from our own games, cross-promoting, then you go into other games. And that's where you really pay a large sum of money so that you get enough users in. And I think those two things are actually probably the biggest things that actually get users into our games. And then if you get like a Google featuring as well, then you get like a lot of people downloading the game essentially.
It pays good to be big, you know. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. You mentioned that in China you have all these many smaller Android stores. So my question is, do they differ technically in any way, or is it simply like 50 same stores with a different title?
The APKs are mostly the same. There's not much differences, but in many cases the IAPs differ, right? So similar as Gplay and iOS, there are maybe some different APIs or SDKs that you have to integrate. But if you have enough of a generic logic in the, in core, it's not a lot of work to go like from one Chinese to 50 app stores. The more problem here is that you have to have relationships in China. And since Outfit7 was bought by a Chinese company, this really made stuff a lot easier. I'm not saying it's hard or impossible, no, but it's much easier if you have a Chinese office also there, because it's a very different market. Like one of the things is they do a lot of in-app purchases through SMS, so through text, which was like, what? Nobody does that in Europe, right? So, but there's a lot of stuff like this. I remember there was something about, fruit, pear. We couldn't have it in the apps because the word for pear and for death was very similar in China. So, this, like also this traditional stuff and culture stuff, it's very different. But don't take me on this one. I don't know. I don't think it was pear, but something, yeah. I answered the question?
Okay, so in one of the previous slides you said that each game has around 10 developers. Who exactly do you consider a developer? Are those just the programmers, the game engine guys, or also the artists, or maybe the tech people? Who gets the game developer credit when you say game developer?
Someone who knows more than just Python, So I was talking about actual game developers. So developers who write C#, who write C++ in our custom engine. So the guys that actually do the work. I'm not going to say that because legally everyone does the work. But yeah, the programmers, the actual programmers are 10, and then you have 10 artist people, and then you have 2 game designers and 1 product guy. And it depends on in which phase the game is in, right? If it's in an update phase, the team is much smaller. But it's around like 10 game developers, just game developers. Developer is a programmer. Software engineer, whatever you call it, yeah.
That's actually a really good question, because we even have Slack channels that say, name of game /dev, and everyone is in it, even though I'd say about 50 people of those are actually programmers. So yeah, there is a lot of confusion about like what a developer is. If you look at general media and stuff, and you say, he's a game developer, it actually usually means they're a game designer, the artist, the sound effects, like they, record stuff on their phone and they make everything around the game. Whereas in the industry, I think a dev is usually called, like the program is usually a dev.
Hi, I have a question regarding the very beginning of the talk, the ideation process. I noticed that you mentioned, and you had it on the screen, that the one-liner comes almost at the end of this whole ideation process, which was very weird to me. I've been taught the different way around. So I'm curious if you could tell us how you sculpt this initial idea into a one-liner without it becoming broad, this.
Excellent question. So I would say that usually, like when an idea starts in someone's head, it's almost a one-liner already. It's like, yes, it's a shooter game, but you need to find and equip the weapons. Like, right? That's like somebody's idea usually. What oftentimes happens is you take that idea and you go to programmers, developers, game designers, marketing teams, and you're like, yes, it's this. And then they start asking you, okay, but like, which world is it set in? And you're like, it's a shooting game where you pick up your weapons set in World War II. And then like this one-liner just starts getting longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. The thing is, it's a fucking game design document almost, right? And that is actually, that's fine, that's actually great. Because the game needs to get more oomph, it needs to get more meat on its bones. But from that initial idea, which is usually very rough, everything happens. So you look at the market, you look at who you want to play it, like who the audience is, you want to see what platforms you're going to play it on, and all of those things need to happen after you've had that initial idea. And then you need to take that giant thing and again reduce it down to its essence. So let's say in the beginning it was a shooter game where you pick up your own weapons. In the end it is a first-person shooter game where you collect resources and then you create your weapons set in a World War II environment. That can be a one-liner, for example. But you didn't know those things in the beginning usually, so that's the process it usually goes through. Something like this. Is that okay? I'll talk more later.
I have a follow-up question to this actually. So let's say you come up with the shooter idea. What does the product marketing team do with this? Do you do like a focus group on unaffiliated random users, or do you do surveys or tests or pay users to get their opinions or something?
So there's a lot of things that they do. Like this is basically either the controlling or the market research team would do this, and they look at other games in the genre. They look at who's playing them, if they're popular right now, what other reference games downloads are like. If there's anything similar already on the market, that's what they need to figure out and what's happening with that. If there isn't anything like that on the market, then they need to find similar things that we can sort of, let's just hypothesize who the target audience is. And those games are actually way more risky, right? Because if you have a game that's like pretty good, it's a first-person shooter, and there's a shitload of people playing it, but then you look at that game and you go, we can make that better, and you're like, okay, yes, right? And you make a better game, and you know there's people playing it. However, you make a game where it's like something completely new, and there's a high chance that you're gonna, you're basically doing this and shooting and hoping you hit something. So the marketing usually team looks at social media, keywords on the internet, so Google keywords and stuff like this. They look at searches, and sometimes they even do surveys, but we rarely do any of those really. But we do focus groups. I'd say even we do more like user tests, which is right. We get people who we think are going to enjoy something like this, and we give them a prototype, and we ask them, "Was this nice?" And they usually say yes, because they're in an environment where they feel it's nice. But then you look at the data, and you're like, "You didn't actually like that. You just said you liked it."
All right, thanks. Any more questions? We can take one more.
We can take one more.
One more.
Okay. So your content has been around for a while now, and you have this huge user base. And tried talking to them, and now they're getting older. Are you trying to maintain those users, or are you more focused on getting new users?
Both. Great question, but both. Like this Mythic Legends that you mentioned, this is new IP where we are actually trying to also, go to older audience, and we've been doing this for a while now, but it's very hard. Right? The market is crazy, so you have to find something. And in these Tamagotchis and for younger, kids and stuff, we are like one of the strongest there. So this is something you must not lose. So this is also something we constantly improve with this, new My Talking Tom, next gen, and so on. So yeah, both. If you want to stay in this market, you constantly have to evolve. You have to try new stuff, and you constantly get burned. Also, that's also. Yeah. He mentioned one game that it still hurts my heart that it didn't work, but it's gonna be fun. Yeah. Did I answer? You want to add something?
That, for example, you take Talking Tom and you like have a kid that grows up on it, and then you give him Talking Tom that can shoot things. Right? That's sort of the idea. You can do something like this, but like you said, it doesn't always work out. And sometimes you start getting into the field of but does that still feel good for the brand, for example? But both needs to happen. If it doesn't, you die.
You have to be in this constant movement, right? So not releasing a fully functional game, maybe instead of making multiple worlds, just make one, release it in a couple of countries, and then you see if you're going in the right direction instead of losing 2 years in development. So this is also, and these prototypes, as I said, we are doing a lot of them. If you do a lot of them, one will sooner or later probably be successful.
All right, big hand for